Abby, you and I have been talking to a lot of couples from all over the world during this crisis. Some of the women I'm hearing from are saying to me, I'm more anxious than my husband, or my husband's more anxious than me. Other couples, one spouse is like, we're going based on science, which of course, I don't know, what does science say nowadays? So many different things, depends what article you read. And the other person is saying, nope, I need my emotions taken into consideration and I'm not able to just go based on science. Let's switch over specifically to the Torah experience, to the Torah observant lifestyle experience. There might be a couple whose doctor, because either spouse is immunocompromised, has told them, you can't use the mikvah. That does happen occasionally. And then they're in nida for a very extended period of time. How do they negotiate how they might be feeling differently about keeping harchakot, right? Keeping the physical distance at this time. Maybe they're choosing out of whatever their own personal reasoning is not to immerse at this time. What if their spouse doesn't agree with their choice? What if she wants to immerse, but he doesn't want her to immerse? What if vice versa? And what if one couple feels the other person is pressuring them? What about with spending money, right? With the fear of the financial future, what if one couple is like, nope, we're just going to keep like functioning the way we normally do, and the other person is like, no, we're reining in the expenses right now. What if one person wants to only order, do supermarket orders, and the other person says, no, that's more money, and I like choosing my produce, and I'm willing, and I know how to follow the rules. Where do we go with all of these conflicts that are arising, and specifically in the context of this crisis?
All right, thank you so much for bringing to the forefront the real life struggles that couples are dealing with on a day-to-day basis. And I think this speaks to how much it's significant to be able to draw on our strengths as couples, because as you heard from Atara just now, it's possible that within one day, so many of these questions could come up. And how does a couple manage that? How does a couple hold that? I think it's a very significant thing to think about. And God willing, also offer some insight. I would like to offer some insight into. So I'm going to offer a piece of like a therapeutic approach. And I want to just say as kind of like in the background that I do think that the conversation is different if there is a clear and apparent danger. Like if one part of the couple is immunocompromised or is a part of the danger category, because then of course there is hopefully reason for both parts of the couple to just err on the side of caution in all regards, even surrounding physical intimacy and mikvah going, because there's a real and present health concern. And a health concern could be asthma, it could be anything. Doesn't have to be humongous like cancer, God forbid. But I think that in dealing with these very sensitive issues, a couple needs to be able to distinguish, is this anxiety or is this a reasonable fear? Okay, and I think the only way to assess that, again, each couple is unique and different in terms of what their realities are, okay? To be able to see how much has anxiety been part of their relationship before? How has it affected their relationship before? Okay, if that's what's coming out, okay, an anxious response. And then how has the couple in the past been able to navigate and deal with anxiety? Okay, now I am of the approach that the only way to manage in a relationship if there's equilibrium. It doesn't work if it's like this, either way, okay? And we're always working towards really like a 50-50 balance. And so that comes with all of the pieces that we've been talking about during these conversations of empathy, of thoughtfulness, of gratitude, of positivity, but not in an unrealistic way. And I think also the ability to literally be present for the other person. And as I spoke about last conversation, how much that entails your own self-care in order to do that. And in our bonus section of today's conversation, we are going to, I am going to be bringing forward a few very Lamaisa step-by-step approach to how to create a dialogue that brings forth validation and empathy. Because in all of these conversations, there's no right answer. There's no like, this is what the answer is, and then everything's going to be good in your marriage, okay? But as with every conversation within marriage, each part of the conversation needs to be heard. There needs to be a level of empathy, a level of understanding, and of course, the validation that happens in order to get there.
I think what's so hard is, you know, we grow up with these values of lo tisnat achicha bilvavecha, right? Not bearing a grudge, not continuing to feel negative about somebody, and the need to be able to air what's bothering me and what I'm concerned about with my spouse is so important. But the Gemara in Yevamot also tells us that just as it's a mitzvah to air grievances and to discuss things, you also need to have that wisdom. It's a mitzvah to not mention something if that other person can't handle it at that moment. In Pirkei Avot, it says, Al tiratzeh chavercha b'shat ka'aso, right? Don't try to have a conversation. Don't, basically, go to bed angry, meaning don't think that you have to talk about something even if it's the wrong timing. That will backfire in a very severe way. But I think, again, knowing when to employ these things, when it's time, when we can open things up without damaging and wounding the other person is so hard. We have these principles, but knowing how to actually play them out is so challenging. You know, I think about how, I remember when this started, when Corona started, that like, we've got to solve all the problems now. And it was maybe 3 weeks in where I sat back and I said, hold on, we're not in a marathon here. Sorry, we're not in a sprint here. We're in a marathon. I have to slow down and not think I'm going to solve everything in one shot. And maybe this week we have this challenge, but maybe next week things will be better. But in that when we were still adjusting, that was so hard to process. And, you know, Abby, in a different episode, in a different conversation, you mentioned mantras. One of my mantras has been, it's a marathon, not a sprint. It's a marathon, not a sprint. And it's been very helpful for me personally.
I think that another piece of this is that it really presents itself, you know, in the light of marathon, not a sprint, okay? That it presents an opportunity to see each other and hear each other in a way that might not have been present in the marriage before. And, you know, when Atara and I were preparing for these conversations, I used the word Corona as the great equalizer. And Atara said, it's not an equalizer because not everyone is equal, and that's not a fair statement. And so when I explained further what I was referring to is that it's the ability for Corona to be like almost like the greatest common denominator is because we all realize that we are in a time of crisis, a time that none of us have ever experienced before. And it is so apparent how each individual is responding potentially so differently in those day-to-day questions that you brought up, in the day-to-day, in the week-to-week, in the hour-to-hour, in the minute-to-minute. Each person is having such a personal experience that hopefully it is an opportunity for, because there is the denominator of the Corona, it's an opportunity for the husband and the wife and the husband to be able to see each other and see their experiences not as a reflection of the other, but as this person's own personal experience. And that could be a tremendous addition and a tremendous learning experience for how the couple relates to each other. Very, very important. And one of the most important things a couple can learn.
Meaning it's how we might emerge stronger from this crisis.
Potentially.
Well, I don't think we gave anybody any easy answers to any of those questions, those scenarios, and insert your own personal experience here, but also maybe I hope the fact that I put them out there validates the people who are going through those specific experiences, although no two are the same. And certainly when you're going through it, it doesn't feel like it's anybody else's experience. But what I would like to invite our listening public to do is join us for a little bonus episode that's accessible right near this one, where Abby is going to go through some actual tips as to how to have those difficult conversations around very sensitive issues. See you soon.